which has the absolute creepiest face I've ever seen, and it gets worse when you start playing it. That's good face. Good day, folks. Jordan here, trying out a new microphone setup with my MacBook Pro for screen recording, so let me know if it's too loud or if something needs to be adjusted down below in the comments section. This is just rudimentary, so I'm just looking to get some feedback if it's not exactly 100%, which I don't expect it to be, but regardless, whatever. Today's video, we're going to be exploring a old version of Ubuntu, and it's not really for any real practical purpose. It's just because of curiosity's factor. What was an old version of Ubuntu like back when it was actually a new operating system, in fact? So what we're going to be exploring today is Ubuntu version 4.10. But we're not looking at the final version, at least in this video. We're going to be exploring its beta, which came out before the final release in October 2004. I guess specifically according to this Wikipedia article, 20th of October 2004. And this operating system actually had a lot going for it in terms of its user interface. This is based on the GNOME or GNOME desktop environment, however you prefer to pronounce it. And it's based again off the Debian operating system, if I didn't say so beforehand, but if I didn't, well, there you now know. Of course, you can look at all the stuff on this Wikipedia article. I'm not going to bother reading it, but the main thing about this was that it was free, and anybody could go onto the internet at the time and they could download this, or they could request that a CD be shipped to them through Canonical's own Ship It service, which I don't believe, I don't believe that's actually going anymore. I think they closed that several years ago. But it used to be a thing where you could request that you had a CD be shipped to you so you could actually install Ubuntu, or at least whatever version of Ubuntu there was at the time. Quite a clever idea. And it actually seemed to work for them. At least, of course, at the time it worked for them because internet connections weren't exactly all that fast. So it really only made sense for Canonical to do something like that. Anyway, so where I actually got this beta from was from WinWorld. So you could go and download this yourself if you were to put into Google Ubuntu 4.10 beta WinWorld PC or some kind of search query related to that. And you could go and download this from their website. It's completely free, and it will be the beta release. Now, before I get into this video, I am going to let you know that my setup is a virtual machine, and it was kind of a pain in the rear end to get it set up. I use VMware Fusion. I know some other people that use different virtualization software, but I am going to let you know that it was a bit of a pain in the rear end to get it configured to where the display resolution was actually functional and not stuck at 640 by 480 like it was or once was. And trying to change the resolution so it'll accommodate the virtual machine doesn't work because it just sends the screen into garbage town. So you're just going to have to deal with whatever is set. I believe it was 1024 by 768. And also, the beta of Ubuntu 4.10 did not have any sound. At least as far as I know, the sound service wasn't working. They did fix that, of course, thank God, in the final release, which we'll probably explore in a later video. But this is just the beta, so do expect that it's not perfect. So, with that introduction long out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into this. So, let's go ahead and I'm going to do a new installation, I guess, so that way you can see just what the installation process is like on video. So we're going to go ahead and one thing to note before we actually get started as well, the ISO names are different between the two. You'll notice that the beta doesn't have release in the name as well as install, because this was just a strict install disk image at the time, so there was no need to have the install text inside of the name because it was strictly for installation purposes. They did not have a live CD until the final release, of course, which I guess makes sense in a way. So here we go. We're going to customize settings because I don't want to be doing something wrong here. So I'm going to set this as beta YT so it separates it, not like it makes a difference. Okay, so one thing I always do, I don't need a gig of RAM. I always turn this down to like 256 because you really don't need all that much when it comes to this operating system. It does complain, but honestly it really doesn't matter because it's not familiar with this particular release. And then one thing you need to keep in mind as well is the hard drive does not, or it should not be SCSI. It needs to be set to IDE. Otherwise, it will not detect it. I don't know what it is about VMware. It will not work if you do not have these set to IDE, so you need to change these. It just seems to work best, so we need to make sure you get that done before we actually get into this. So, with that having been done, now we can go ahead and boot up the virtual machine and install. And just to make it a little bit easier for everybody, I'm going to go ahead and go into full screen here. So, as you can see, it looks just like Ubuntu 4.10, of course, with the familiar press enter to start up, unless, of course, you had to specify some other parameters. And here we are at the setup screen. Now, this does not have a graphical user interface-based installer. Neither does it have a live CD bundled in with the installation media. This is strictly an install disk, like I was saying, so it just boots straight into a familiar installation screen for Linux. Specifically, Debian has this very similar, if not literally identical, setup process. And as far as I know, Ubuntu Server to this day actually still uses a setup process very similar to this. They didn't really change it too terribly much, which I guess is not a bad thing. Don't change what doesn't work. So, as you can see, it picked up the optical drive there, picked up the network card, and we'll set the host name to Ubuntu, whatever. So now, I believe it's going to try looking for the hard drive, and as you can see, it did find it there. And we're just going to go ahead and erase the entire disk, and write changes, and we'll let this install. Now, as far as I know, I believe Ubuntu 6.06, if not, it was the prior one to that, Ubuntu 5.10, but I believe it was 6.06, long-term support, that actually introduced the graphical installer. As far as I know, it was the first one to do it. I know that Ubuntu 5.10 was the first one to have the graphical startup screen, and I forget what they used to do the graphical startup screen, but I know that it was some kind of open source thing. I can't remember off the top of my head, but you'll have to bear with me on that one. But I don't believe that 5.10 had the graphical setup. I think it was 6.06, so take that with a grain of salt. I think that's what that was. You can read the Wikipedia article and correct me in the comments section, whatever. Doesn't really matter. I can read it myself too. I'm just, thinking on a whim, so take my word with a grain of salt, of course, as always. So, alright, there we go. Of course, I'm installing on a solid-state drive, so of course it's going to go a hell of a lot more quickly, as expected. Now, one thing I need to do real quickly is I need to take out... No, it already did that. Okay, I kind of got a little worried that I had to eject the ISO image, but whatever. So as you can see, it starts up in text mode, and there is no graphical user, or there's no graphical splash screen, it's just the text mode. But while this boots up, oh yeah, I forgot, this is a quirk of the virtual machine, if you're able to see this, of course. All these ACPI fails are incompatible with they're just incompatible things with the VM. So these will not prevent it from booting up. It's just kind of annoying that they show up. I don't know what they relate to. They have different IDs, so whatever. It's just a quirk of the VM. These don't actually pop up on an actual computer. I've tried it. And all these different drivers that are trying to load in there. Oh my goodness. Okay, so there's the DHCP configuration client. Some kind of open source thing. Sets the date and time. And here we are. Welcome to your new Ubuntu system. This program will now walk you through the process of setting up your newly installed system. It will start with the basics, time zone selection, and adding a user, and then progress to installing additional software to tune this new Ubuntu system to your needs. So, as far as I know, I believe it ejected the CD, so I need to put that back in there. And then once we do that, then we can get started with this, because what it wants to do is install additional components, and it will expect to do that from the internet. However, it falls back to the CD when the internet doesn't work, which of course is not going to work because Canonical pulled all this crap years ago, so it's not going to work. So once we get past all this stuff here, whoops, I did not type that right. So yeah, as you can see, it's asking to do stuff with the internet. However, it's not going to work because, again, Canonical pulled all this crap a long time ago. So I'm just going to make it a lot easier and say no. And now it's going to read off of the CD all of the different software that it wants to install. And so, yeah, this is the part that takes forever because it has to unpack all these different libraries. So I'll be right back once this finishes. Alrighty, now we get to configure X server, my favorite. So this is where the virtual machine normally tends to get a little bit screwy because you gotta be careful with the beta when it comes to these toggles. I'd like to be able to enable high definition, however, unfortunately if I go past 1024 by 768, it tends to get a little screwy. I'm not sure why this is. I'm going to press my luck with 1152 by 864, but I'm not going to guarantee success rates because the graphics drivers that VMware uses don't really quite play well when it comes to this beta. I mean, they're functional, don't get me wrong, they work, but whatever. As you can see, it's configured OpenOffice, which we'll take a look at in this video. It is version 1.1.2, which is pretty interesting. It's compiled specifically for Ubuntu, which I'm quite surprised that they actually include something like this in the beta, although, hey, I'm not complaining. Free software is always good. Thank you for choosing Ubuntu. Setup of your Ubuntu system is complete. You may now log in at the login prompt. If you want to revisit the setup process at a later date, just run the base-config program. I will be sure to. And then it starts up X Windows with the GNOME desktop environment. And that takes a while for it to initialize. Hopefully I don't get ear raped. Thank God I didn't get ear raped. So there we go. And unfortunately, I think it picked a lower screen resolution, which kind of sucks, but it looks like that's what we're going to have to deal with because I don't dare change the screen resolution. So here you can see the login screen is very simple, and hopefully the mouse is not screwy because if you go off to this edge of the screen, it tends to get a little messed up. Again, that's a quirk of the virtual machine. I would have done this on an actual computer if it wasn't Celeron 500, because that's pretty much the only error-appropriate computer I could get this to run on. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. So, alright. Let's go ahead and log in here. One thing that's pretty interesting, which I think they fixed this in the later ones as well, there is no arrow to substitute an enter press at this password prompt, which is pretty interesting. I don't know why that is. And also these buttons down here are kind of hard to see. They're not really all that distinguishable. But you can see you can pick if you had a different desktop environment or what they call a session installed. You could fall back to one of these or do a fail-safe terminal login if you want. So we're just going to go ahead and pick the default GNOME, voice crack, GNOME desktop environment. There we go, get it right. And let's log in. Yeah, it looks like I got stuck in 640 by 480. So this is a problem that I was having where, I don't know if it's going to work, but let's see, screen resolution. Yeah, see, the only resolution that pops up is 640 by 480, and the only way you'd be able to let it actually work is if you were to let it sit with whatever default settings it was set to. So my guess is if I were to go and find the terminal and run base-config.
Yeah, let's do one for this. Let me do it just in case. And time zone, US, and Pacific. CD-ROM still in drive. I know that was what it is, so let's back in there. Can we see? I not. There's zero. Okay, so I go to the libraries here. My default, disable the 54 resolution. So maybe it's lucky. So it's just libraries. They should have a toggle. Maybe. I don't know. We can't experience this on the rolling wheels for the rest of the video. It's not a deal breaker. I know that in the final release of the video. It looks like it's actually working on. You need a toggle, but that's fine.
I mean, we all know what the terminal is. There's no point in really bothering with it. It's just for a video anyway. So here we are at the Ubuntu 4.10 beta desktop. And it's identical to Ubuntu 4.10, let's just put it that way. The only thing that differentiates the two mainly is the desktop wallpaper and maybe some version numbers on the included software. Otherwise, it's identical. Well, and the sound works in the final release. But the application selection is pretty much the exact same. I mean, you get an archive manager for, your archives that you download, like your tar.gzs and your zips and your rars and the .7zs and such. And I believe you can also create archives as well using that program. And there goes the screwy mouse. Once again, my apologies for the mouse if it tends to act like that throughout the rest of this video. Nothing I can do because, of course, VMware Tools will not install. At least I can't get it to work. So let's see. Oh yes, Minesweeper, which has the absolute creepiest face I've ever seen. And it gets worse when you start playing it. That's a good face. And that's the best one yet. So yeah. We're just going to leave it at that. Try not to leave any kind of sexist jokes in the comment section, please. I would appreciate that. It does have GIMP, which is pretty cool. Oh, God. Yeah, that was a pretty bad idea. Can we just quit out of that? That was not a smart idea. Alright, what's next? Oh, yeah, Firefox. So this actually includes a pre-release version of Firefox, which is pretty interesting to take a look at. It is version 0.9.3, and it does actually work, as far as I know. And we do have the internet connected, because it did pick up an IP address with DHCP. So we should, in theory, be able to go to Google. As long as yep, there it goes. Yep, we're configured for internet access, so as you can see, there's Google. Although in incredibly low resolution, it's not going to look pretty. What else is there? Oh yeah, Evolution. Of course, that's the email client that early versions of Ubuntu used. I don't know if they actually still make Evolution nowadays. I'd have to look that up. I'm not too Linux savvy. I've taken a look at a couple of Linux distributions. Maybe not on this channel, but in my life, I've taken a look at quite a few different Linux distributions, from Linux Mint to Linux Lite to Zorin to Ubuntu to all these different distributions, and haven't tinkered around with them all. So I know I'm not too Linux savvy, but I know a couple of things, so whatever. Anyway, VLC does not come preloaded. VLC didn't exist at this time, for those who actually don't know. So yeah, I want to take a look at OpenOffice real quick, because I was actually kind of curious to see how that looked. Oh yeah, Debian. Got the Debian logo right there on the OpenOffice thing. That's how you know that this was based on the Debian Linux distro. Made by Sun in 2004. This must have been when OpenOffice was a brand new thing. And I don't know at this time if it was strictly limited to just running on Linux or if it was actually ported over to Windows. I would assume that it had both ports, but I'm not too sure. Anyway, that's probably outside of the limits of this video. There's also a bug report tool, but unfortunately that goes through the web browser and it goes to this bugzilla.ubuntu.com, and I don't believe this website actually exists anymore. I could be wrong, but I don't believe it does. So we'll give it a look-see here. I'm not entirely sure. Although I'm not expecting anything to load. It's probably just going to sit here and yeah, there's nothing there anymore, so I'm not going to bother with that. I mean, it would have existed back in the day. It would have been a very simple website, but, you know, that's about it. This is also very old, that it has a floppy formatter, but since there's no floppy drive, there's nothing to format, so that makes sense. Run as a different user, root terminal, system monitor. So this will be your task manager of the day. And as you can see, this operating system is actually decently efficient, only using 86 megabytes, or actually that's more 87 megabytes, of the 256 megs of RAM. Although, rather annoyingly, there's no percentage, like the newer Linuxes. Or Linux, I don't know how you're supposed to say that. It's probably cringeworthy for some people watching this video. I'm sorry. Desktop background. I don't believe there was any extra wallpapers. I think these were the only ones. The 760 by 176 wallpaper with the solid color surrounding it, which is this pretty easy on the eyes gray, if I'm honest. It looks decent enough. Although it kind of clashes with this sort of caramel interface color. Not my thing, but again, it's a beta, so you can't really be too hard on it. Palm OS devices. I actually do have a Palm, I think it's an M105. No. What the hell was it that I have? Anyway, it'd be kind of interesting to connect it to an old Ubuntu installation that had this utility in it and actually see if you could sync data to and from. I think that'd be pretty neat. So, other than that, I mean, that's pretty much it. There's not too much to really... Oh god, it's off the screen. There's not too much to really speak of when it comes to this operating system. It's just the beta. And that's the same thing that goes for the final release of Ubuntu 4.10, although it's more exciting because it actually has a login sound and it actually has working screen resolution, and I guess it'd be more interesting. I'm not sure. So, probably not that kind of video, but, you know, it's more interesting to take a look at this. I think, now that I think about it, if I'm going to be honest, I think the next release I'm going to take a look at would be this one's successor, 5.04. So, oh, excuse me. So keep your eye out on that. So keep your eye out on that one. I don't know when that's going to come out, but this is about the best that I can do right now. So it is what it is. So that's about it for now. I'm going to go ahead and shut this off, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch, and I will see you all in a future video.